Chinua Achebe was a Nigerian novelist and critic, a very important literary figure from African literature. He was born in 1930 and died in 2013. The major works penned by Achebe include Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God, No Longer at Ease, and so on. He is often referred to as the father of African literature because he has contributed to African literature seeking escape from the colonial domination that was there in the African literature and trying to draw from the native traditions of the African tribe called Igbo, their customs and beliefs, as well as incorporating the Christian influences and the conflict between the Western and the native African value systems, and so on. The poem Refugee, Mother and Child that we are discussing today has been written in the context of the Biafran independence and the revolution and the civil war that had happened as a result of the same. Achebe was a supporter of Biafran independence, and he had even acted as a spokesperson for the people of the new nation. But later, we understand from history that after the Nigerian civil war, Nigerian government recaptured Biafra, and a lot of people got displaced from their homes, and the subsequent starvation, malnutrition, and all the problems associated with being a refugee in one's own country has been portrayed in this particular poem, Refugee, Mother and Child. As we live in an era hearing a lot of news about refugees all over the world, this poem continues to be relevant in the discussions and reflections on humanitarian concerns as far as refugees are concerned. Now, the refugee camp is not a scene that is to be lightly considered, especially with reference to the children that have to stay as refugees there, because as we see from the Biafran refugee camps and refugee camps globally in general, children suffer the most physical, mental and psychological impact and aftermath of refugeeism. Remember Aylan Kurdi, the 3-year-old victim of the Syrian refugee family? So in this poem, Refugee, Mother and Child, Chinua Achebe depicts the hapless children who are displaced from their homes, because the poem is about a refugee mother and her child. So let's dive into the poem Refugee, Mother and Child by Chinua Achebe. No Madonna and child could touch that picture of a mother's tenderness for a son she soon would have to forget. So initially there is the reference to the world famous painting called Madonna and Child by the Italian painter Duccio di Buonsegna. This is a painting that shows Virgin Mary carrying infant Jesus and is considered to be the epitome of motherly love towards the baby. Now, why does the poet compare Madonna and child to this particular situation? The poet says that no Madonna and child could touch that picture of a mother's tenderness for a son she soon would have to forget. Here is the picture of a refugee mother and child, where the mother's tenderness for the son is reflective that it is a son she would soon have to forget. Meaning, here is a mother holding tight to her son, knowing that she would soon have to forget the baby, or that the baby is soon going to die. And the tenderness shown by the mother is so supreme that no Madonna and child, no ideal paintings that epitomize maternal love could come anywhere near this realistic picture of the refugee mother holding tight to a child that is going to die very soon. The poet continues. The air was heavy with odors of diarrhea of unwashed children with washed out ribs and dried up bottoms struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. These lines capture the pathetic situation of the children living in refugee camps. The issue of health, starvation, and malnutrition is very visible in these lines. There is the problem of diarrhea, food poisoning faced by the children, and the lack of hygiene and sanitation because the children are said to be unwashed. So naturally, the unwashed children who have been who have been suffering from diarrhea, has caused the air to be filled with a pungent, foul smell. The air was heavy with the odor of diarrhea from the unwashed children. Now, are the children not just unwashed? No, they are not just unwashed, but their ribs are washed out. Okay, they are merely skin and bone. We can find that their ribs are washed out. That is, the children are looking like skeletons, and dried up bottoms struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. Now, because of starvation, the children must have really been hungry, and without any food, their bellies are blown empty. And the figure of the children in skeleton struggling in labored steps. The children must be playing around or walking around with great effort. The air was heavy with odors of diarrhea of unwashed children with washed out ribs and dried up bottoms, struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. So this is the situation of the refugee camp. Now, the poet continues, most mothers there had long ceased to care, but not this one. Most mothers in the refugee camp had lost their hopes and had even ceased to care about the children because there was nothing that they could do. They were helpless, even though they wanted to give the best care and protection and security and the best possible food to their children. It was out of their hands. So, most mothers had long ceased to care for their kids, but not this one. What makes this refugee mother stand out from the others? She held a ghost smile between her teeth, and in her eyes the ghost of a mother's pride as he combed the rust-colored hair left on his skull. Okay, so we can see the image of the mother doing what seems to be a daily chore for any mother. She held a ghost smile between her teeth. As she is smiling, it looks like a ghost smile. Okay, so even though the mother is smiling, you feel like the liveliness and that spark and energy, the vibrance has died. Only the ghost of that smile remains. Most mothers had long ceased to care for their children, but not this one. This mother smiles at her child even though it is a ghost smile. And in her eyes, the ghost of a mother's pride as she combed the hair of the child. In this mother's eyes, there was a pride, but again, the life and the vigor of that pride had long lost gone. The ghost of her mother's pride only was remaining. And what was she doing? Something very mundane for any mother. As she combed the rust colored hair left on his skull, there is too little hair that is left on the child's skull, meaning his bald head is visible. And then, singing in her eyes, began carefully to part it. The child is taken very tender care of by the mother. She, as she combs his rust colored hair, very carefully parts the hair, and her eyes are singing. Probably no voice is coming out of her mouth because she is gulping or swallowing the fact that the child is going to pass away very soon. In spite of that heart-rending situation, she held a smile between her teeth and a pride in her eyes, singing in her eyes. All these are very ghostly because it lacks life and vigor. In another life, this would have been a little daily act of no consequence before his breakfast and school. If it was another situation, if things were different, this mundane activity of parting the child's hair and combing it and making him ready would have been an act done between breakfast and getting ready for school. But that is another story, and this is different. In another life, this would have been a little daily act of no consequence when the child was being prepared to go to school between breakfast and going to school. Now, she did it like putting flowers on a tiny grave. This situation is different because this act of combing the child's hair, parting his hair, and taking care of the few rust colored hair that is left on the child's skull is very important for the mother because probably the child will die very soon, and this might be the last opportunity that the mother will be getting to take care of him. Probably it felt like putting flowers on a tiny grave. So, a very silly act that is done on a day-to-day basis by a mother to a child is very significant here. She does it like a sacred ceremony, something like putting flowers on a tiny grave. So, with this image, the poem comes to an end, and we do not know what happens to the baby or the mother after this, but it is likely that the child must have died soon because that was the situation, the pathetic situation of the refugee camp in Biafra. So, the poem reminds us that no idealized pictures and sentiments and epitomes of maternal love would go anywhere near this mother's tenderness. We can see the analogy between refugee mother and child and Madonna and child. So while the other one is an imaginative painting, this is a real life situation. While Madonna and child is imagined by the painter as the epitome of maternal love, here we have it in practice, because while almost all the others mothers in the refugee camp had ceased caring for their children, this one had not lost her hope. She clung to her child's life for dear life and started taking care of it as if she was doing it for the last time. So this poem gives us the very heartrending picture of the Biafran refugee camp, and by keeping the outcast mother's situation as a real situation, a mother's unconditional love for the child is portrayed in the poem.